Welcome back students. Today we will continue the remaining topics from chapter 6. So let's start. Balanced, surplus and deficit budget. A budget may be in balanced, surplus or deficit budget. So the first is surplus budget. When government estimate revenue are more than government estimate expenditure in the budget is called a surplus budget. Then balanced budget. A government budget is said to be a balanced budget in which government estimate revenue are shown equal to government estimate expenditure. Deficit budget. When government expenditure exceeds government revenue in the budget is said to be a deficit budget. Next, measures of government deficit, revenue deficit, fiscal deficit and primary deficit. So the first one is revenue deficit. The revenue deficit refers to the excess of government's revenue expenditure over revenue received. The implication of revenue deficit are: it indicates the inability of the government to meet its regular and recurring expenditure in the proposed budget. It implies the government is dissaving, that is, government is using up saving of other sector of the economy to finance its consumption expenditure. It also implies that the government has to make up its deficit from capital received through borrowing, which leads to an increase in liability, or through disinvestment, which reduces the assets. Use of capital received for meeting the extra consumption expenditure lead to an inflationary situation in the economy. A high revenue deficit gives a warning signal to the government either to cut its expenditure or to increase its revenue. Next, fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is equal to the excess of total expenditure over the sum of revenue and capital received excluding borrowings. Fiscal deficit is in fact total borrowing which government has to do from all sources. As government borrowing increases, its liability to pay interest in future also increases. Payment of interest increases revenue expenditure, leading to higher revenue deficit. So the third one is primary deficit. Primary deficit is equal to fiscal deficit less interest payments. It is a basic measure of fiscal irresponsibility. It indicates how much of government current borrowing is going to meet interest payments and how much will be left to meet each other expenses. Next, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to the policy under which the government uses its expenditure and revenue programs to produce desirable effects and avoid undesirable effects on the national income, output and employment. Keynes, in this general theory of employment, interest and money, emphasized the role of the fiscal policy to stabilize the level of output and employment. The government directly affects the level of equilibrium income in two ways. Government purchase of goods and service increase the aggregate demand, and the taxes and transfer payments affect the relation between income and disposable income, and thereby changes the amount of income available for consumption and saving with the households. Next, downsizing, the role of government. When the government withdraws from its different role, it is called downsizing the role of government. So the case for downsizing the role of government are: inefficiency of public sector undertakings, deficit in balance of payment, excessive control in private sector, and fiscal deficit. So the first one is inefficiency of public sector undertakings. During 1951 to 1990, public sector was assigned an important role to play for the economic development of India. Point number 2 is deficit in balance of payment. So there was a huge deficit in balance of payment due to sharp rise in import and slow growth of exports. Point number 3, excessive control in private sector. The industrial licensing and control on trade and industry had hampered the growth of the private sector. Industrial liberalization therefore has become necessary. Point number 4, fiscal deficit. The necessity of reducing fiscal deficit through cut in government expenditure by reducing subsidies was felt. Next, implication of downsizing government's role. Decrease in role in the public sector, reducing indirect control, trade liberalization, foreign private investment, and change in role of RBI. So the first one is decrease in the role in the public sector. The first implication of downsizing government role is that the government has reduced its direct participation in productive activity in a big way. Point number 2, reduction in direct control. Another implication is that the government has reduced its direct control on trade and industry, such as abolitions, industrial licensing, and registrations on import. Point number 3, trade liberalization. In order to open up the economy under the new economic policy, quantitative restrictions on import have been lifted. Point number 4, foreign private investment. Since 1991, the government has liberalized its policy regarding foreign investment. Point number 5, change in role of RBI. The role of RBI was reduced from regulation to facilitator of financial sector. As a result, financial sector was allowed to take decision on several matters without consulting the RBI. So students, with these topics, chapter 6 ends. Thank you.